What's some strange unsolved mysteries? Nature, crime, science, anything. Story 1. The Tamam Shud case is one of the weirdest unsolved deaths ever. In 1948, a well-dressed man was found dead on an Australian beach, sitting against a seawall like he'd just fallen asleep. No wounds. The autopsy said he was almost certainly poisoned, but doctors couldn't find any poison at all. He had no ID, no wallet, and every label on his clothes had been carefully removed. Fingerprints went worldwide. No matches. It's like the guy had no past. Witnesses later said they'd seen him alive the night before, lying in the exact same spot, his arm moving and then dropping. They thought he was drunk. He may have been dying for hours. Police later found a brown suitcase in a nearby train station locker. It was his, same unique stitching. But again, all the clothing tags were removed. Still no name. Then it gets creepy. Hidden in his pants was a scrap of paper reading, Tamam Shud, it is finished. It came from a poetry book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. A copy of that book turned up with the final page torn out and a handwritten code inside that no one has ever cracked. This all happened at the start of the Cold War. A man with no identity, a poison that left no trace, and an unbreakable cipher. Story 2. The stone spheres of Costa Rica are one of those mysteries that feel deliberately unanswered. Deep in the jungles of Costa Rica, archaeologists found giant stone spheres, some as small as basketballs, others over 6 feet wide and weighing up to 15 tons. They're carved from solid volcanic rock and are so perfectly round that, even today, engineers argue over how they achieved that level of precision without metal tools. No one knows who made them, when exactly they were made, or why. The civilization believed to have created them left no written records, no carvings explaining their purpose, nothing. Just hundreds of massive stone balls scattered across jungle, hillsides, and river valleys. Then there's the bigger problem, transport. Many spheres were found miles away from where the stone naturally occurs, across rough terrain, rivers, and dense rainforest. No wheels, no animals, no roads. Somehow, they were moved anyway. Some spheres appear to have been placed in deliberate patterns, lines, curves, geometric arrangements, suggesting planning, symbolism, maybe even astronomy. Unfortunately, once people discovered them, many were dragged away, blown apart, or used as garden decorations, destroying most of the original layouts. Theories range from status symbols to territorial markers to ceremonial objects, and then of course, the fringe ideas, lost civilizations, advanced technology, aliens. No theory fully explains the precision and the logistics. Someone went through an insane effort to make these and never bothered to explain why. Story 3. The Phoenix Lights are one of the few UFO cases that even skeptics admit is deeply unsettling. On the night of March 13th, 1997, thousands of people across Arizona looked up and saw something massive moving silently across the sky. A huge V-shaped formation of lights, slow, steady, and low enough that people could judge its size. Many said it blocked out stars behind it. This wasn't a quick flash or a distant dot. It hung there. Police departments were flooded with calls. Air traffic control had nothing on radar that explained it. Military bases nearby denied running exercises. Here's where it gets creepy. The governor of Arizona at the time, Fife Symington, saw it too. He was a trained Air Force pilot, not some random witness. At first, he mocked the whole thing publicly. Years later, after leaving office, he admitted he'd seen it and said the official explanation was nonsense. The government eventually claimed the lights were military flares, followed later by some kind of aircraft. But flares don't move in tight formation, don't stay perfectly spaced, and don't silently cruise over an entire state. To this day, there's no explanation that satisfies the witnesses, especially the ones who knew exactly what planes, flares, and helicopters look like. Whatever it was, a lot of people saw the same thing, and the people who denied it admitted later they lied. Story 4. Most people on Reddit have probably heard about it, but Oak Island, also known as the Money Pit, is a pretty big mystery. In 1795, Daniel McGuinness of Nova Scotia saw lights coming from the uninhabited Oak Island, named because, well, it's full of oak trees. He and some friends went to the island and found a large circular depression, so they started digging and discovered a layer of flagstones a few feet below. On the pit walls there were visible markings from a pick. As they dug down, they discovered layers of logs at about every 10 feet. They gave up at 30 feet. That's just the beginning. The Onslow Company picked up where McGuinness and his friends left off, reaching a depth of 90 feet, finding layers of logs every 10 feet, and layers of charcoal, putty, and coconut fiber at 40, 50, and 60 feet. It should be noted that coconuts, and thus their fibers, aren't native to anywhere near Nova Scotia. Somewhere between 80 and 90 feet, they found a coated rock that was translated saying something like, 40 feet down, 2 million pounds lie buried. This is getting long, so I'll DR it, the pit floods, and not like we'll just pump out the water flood. The water comes in from 3 parts of the island with the tide. Many people and companies have tried to reach the bottom, but with no success. If interested, there is tons and tons of info on this. Story 5. The hum is one of those things that sounds fake until you actually hear it. Basically, some people around the world hear a constant low-frequency sound, like a distant diesel engine idling forever. It doesn't stop, ever. And it's not just something they hear. It vibrates through their entire body. People say they feel it in their chest, their teeth, their bones. Earplugs don't block it. Moving houses sometimes doesn't help. Some people have heard it for years. Most people hear nothing at all. What makes it worse is that the people who hear it aren't all conspiracy types, engineers, scientists, normal people who slowly start losing sleep, sanity, and jobs because they can't escape this invisible noise. Doctors often tell them it's tinnitus, but tinnitus doesn't shake your rib cage. On Unsolved Mysteries, there's a segment where an audio technician who hears the hum actually manages to recreate it digitally. When he plays it back, it's horrifying. This deep, pulsing tone that feels wrong, like your body isn't meant to experience it. Even people who don't hear the hum instinctively recoil. No one knows what causes it. Industrial machinery, submarines, power grids, geological activity. Some theories get darker. The scariest part, if you don't hear it, that doesn't mean it's not there. Story 6. This one messed with my head more than almost anything else. During a string theory debate hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, theoretical physicist James Gates casually dropped something that sounds like sci-fi bullcrap, except it isn't. Gates explains that while working with the insanely complex equations used in string theory, he and his team started noticing something strange buried deep in the math. Not metaphors, not patterns you can hand-wave away. Actual binary code, and not just random ones and zeros. What they found mathematically matched error-correcting codes, the same kind computers use to detect and fix corrupted data. Very specific ones engineers intentionally design so information doesn't break when transmitted. Let that sink in. These equations weren't meant to describe computers. They were meant to describe the fundamental structure of reality: space, time, particles, forces. And yet, hidden inside the math was something that behaves exactly like code, meant to preserve information. Gates basically says, I was not looking for this. I didn't want it to be there, but there it was. So now you've got 2 options, and both are unsettling. Either it's the most disturbing coincidence in modern physics, or reality, at its deepest level, runs on something suspiciously like software. Biggest mind blast of my life. Story 7. The MV Joyita, often compared to the Mary Celeste. However, unlike the Mary Celeste, which has been explained, the Joyita hasn't. The Joyita had a crew of 25. The ship was basically unsinkable because it had either a cork hull or a cork-lined hull. I can't remember which. It was found abandoned and adrift in the Pacific with no crew on board. Although the radio was still working, it had a very short range, something like 3 miles, if memory serves. The ship itself was in really bad shape, albeit afloat. It had some corroded pipes. The boat was listing and had barnacle growth, meaning it had been adrift, abandoned for quite some time. All the lifeboats were missing, and for some reason a mattress was placed on the engine. Also, there was a doctor's bag found with a bunch of bloody bandages. Story 8. The Green Children. While there are some explanations, there are lots of unanswered questions. It's been a while since I've read about them, so you should click the link, but I'll tell you what I remember. Around the 12th century in England, 2 children were found in a field. One boy, one girl. Their skin was green. They spoke an unknown language, and their clothes were markedly different from those of the locals. The people that found them brought them back to a house and offered them food. The children started crying. They wouldn't eat bread or meat, but got excited when they saw, I think, beans. The boy died soon after, but the girl lived a, I think, normal lifespan and was able to tell where they came from. According to her, they came through caves that they were not supposed to be in and wound up in the field. They were blinded by the sun and passed out, or some such. She said she came from a place where the sun didn't shine and all the people there had green skin. Her skin turned to a normal color eventually, but people commented that she was of loose morals. Story 9. Derinkuyu. This is an underground city in Turkey. The city was built around 8000 BC, has 13 floors, and could hold 20,000 people quite easily. The strange thing, aside from the fact that it's a huge multi-leveled underground city built 10,000 years ago, is that there is no logical reason for it having been built. You would think maybe the people built it to hide from some invading force. They are in a series of caves, so if the army found even one entrance, the people of the city could have been ended in any number of ways. Smoke, fire, blocking air shafts, or just plain waiting them out till they starved. There is some evidence the city might have been enlarged under the Byzantine Empire, but it is generally accepted that most of it was built in 8000 BC. Story 10. I'm from Phoenix, and I was only 4 years old the night those lights appeared, but damn, I remember it well. I was at my aunt's house with my family, and we were all just having dinner outside when we saw them start appearing over the valley. All the neighbors came out, and we all stood in the street watching. At first we all thought, oh hey, that's neat, because we lived very near an Air Force base and thought it was them. But then so many more started appearing, and the way they appeared was so strange, they just faded in and out. When they formed a V, everybody went inside their homes because we thought some crap was about to go down. Story 11. An individual that vanishes is one thing, but how about an entire village of 2,000 men, women, and children? In November 1930, a fur trapper named Joe LaBelle made his way on snowshoes to an Eskimo village on the shores of Lake Anjikuni in northern Canada. LaBelle was familiar with the village, which he knew as a thriving fishing community of about 2,000 residents. When he arrived, however, the village was deserted. All of the huts and storehouses were vacant. He found one smoldering fire on which there was a pot of blackened stew. LaBelle notified the authorities, and an investigation was begun, and which turned up some bizarre findings. No footprints of any of the residents were found. If they had vacated the village, all of the Eskimo sled dogs were found buried under a 12-foot-high snowdrift. They had all starved to death. All of the Eskimos' food and provisions were found undisturbed in their huts, and there was one last unnerving discovery. The Eskimos' ancestral graves had been emptied. Story 12. Everyone knows the Bermuda Triangle. What most people don't know is that it might not be special at all. In the 1970s, researcher Ivan T. Sanderson proposed something way creepier. The Bermuda Triangle is just one of 12 identical danger zones around the planet. He called them the Vile Vortices. Here's the unsettling part. They're all positioned at roughly equal distances from one another, forming a geometric pattern around Earth, mostly near 30 degrees north and south latitude, almost like someone placed them there on purpose. At these locations, strange things keep happening. Ships vanish, planes lose navigation, compasses spin or fail, electronics malfunction, time discrepancies are reported. Besides the Bermuda Triangle, these zones include the Devil's Sea near Japan, areas in the South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, and even regions over land. Mainstream explanations say it's coincidence, bad weather, or human error, but that doesn't explain the global symmetry or why anomalies cluster instead of spreading randomly. Either Earth has a very weird habit of breaking physics in the same places, or we're living on a planet with built-in fault lines no one fully understands, and that's way more disturbing than one triangle. Story 13. When you really think about the gravity of it, the fact that this thing has been buzzing continuously since 1982 with only a handful of brief interruptions makes it incredibly unsettling, at least to me. Something that persists isn't just random noise. It suggests intention, or at the very least a source that can't or won't shut off. What makes it even stranger is that in the past few weeks, the activity has been increasing. More intensity, more occurrences, more attention was drawn to it after decades of near silence in the public eye. And that's the part that bothers me most. Instead of answers, every new detail just raises more questions. Why does it exist at all? Why has it barely stopped? Why now? The longer it continues, the less it feels like an accident, and the more it feels like something we were never meant to fully understand. Story 14. The Frederick Valentich disappearance is one of the most unsettling aviation mysteries ever recorded. In 1978, Valentich, a 20-year-old pilot, was flying a small Cessna over the Bass Strait between mainland Australia and Tasmania. About halfway through the flight, he radioed air traffic control, sounding calm but confused. He said a strange aircraft was flying above him. It wasn't on radar. It wasn't behaving like a plane. It hovered. Then it circled him. Then it paced his aircraft. At one point, he said it had a metallic surface and green lights. Air traffic control told him there was no known traffic in the area. Valentich then said his engine was running rough. Seconds later, he reported the object was hovering directly above him. His last transmission ended with 17 seconds of metallic scraping sounds, like something grinding against the aircraft. Then silence. No distress call, no crash debris, no oil slick, nobody. Despite one of the largest air and sea searches in Australian history, nothing was ever found. No confirmed wreckage, no explanation. Just a vanished plane and a chilling radio transcript. Skeptics say disorientation. UFO believers say abduction. Aviation experts say none of the explanations fully fit. A pilot doesn't just disappear mid-flight, especially after calmly describing something pacing him from above. Story 15. The Tunguska event is one of those moments where reality briefly stopped making sense. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, a massive explosion detonated over a remote region of Siberia. The blast flattened 80 million trees across more than 800 square miles. People hundreds of miles away were knocked off their feet. Seismic stations picked it up. Atmospheric pressure waves circled the globe. But here's the part that still freaks people out. There was no crater. For days afterward, people across Western Europe reported nights so bright they could read newspapers at midnight. The sky glowed. Something had dumped an insane amount of energy into the atmosphere, far more powerful than most nuclear bomb tests. Scientists believe it was likely an asteroid or comet airburst, exploding before impact. Others suggest an underground gas explosion, but none of the explanations fully account for every detail, especially the atmospheric effects and lack of debris. And then there's the timing. In 1908, Nikola Tesla was conducting experiments at Wardenclyffe Tower, attempting to use Earth itself as an energy resonator. Tesla later claimed he could transmit enormous power wirelessly across the planet. Did he have anything to do with Tunguska? Almost certainly not, but the coincidence keeps the theory alive. Something exploded with the force of a weapon before weapons like that existed, and to this day, no one can say exactly what it was. Story 16. The Burrows Cave is one of those stories that sits right on the edge between obvious bullcrap and wait. What? In 1982, a man named Russell Burrows claimed he stumbled into a hidden cave in southern Illinois while hiking. Inside, he said, were thousands of artifacts, coins, carvings, tablets, covered in inscriptions resembling ancient African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean scripts. The implication was insane. Ancient Old World civilizations reaching deep into North America long before Columbus. Academics immediately tore it apart. No verified location, no controlled excavation. Burrows wouldn't reveal the cave's exact position, claiming looters would destroy it. Many artifacts looked suspiciously modern. Linguists pointed out errors no ancient scribe would make. To most experts, it's a hoax, full stop. But here's why it lingers. Some inscriptions appear to mix multiple ancient languages in oddly specific ways. Certain symbols match real historical scripts a casual forger probably wouldn't know. And the sheer volume of artifacts, if faked, would require years of effort. So either one man fabricated one of the most elaborate archaeological hoaxes ever, or something deeply inconvenient was found in a cave no one can verify. Probably fake, still unsettling. Story 17. The Philadelphia experiment is one of those stories that's probably bullcrap, but still refuses to die because the idea behind it is so unsettling. The story goes that in 1943, the U.S. Navy ran a secret experiment on the destroyer USS Eldridge to make it invisible to radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. According to the legend, it worked too well. The ship allegedly vanished from the Philadelphia Naval Yard, briefly appeared in Norfolk, Virginia, and then snapped back into place. When it returned, things were very wrong. Crew members were supposedly disoriented, insane, horribly burned, or worse, fused into the ship itself. Some allegedly phased in and out of reality afterward. The Navy denied everything, of course. Most historians agree the story as told is nonsense. Logs don't match. Ships were misidentified. Witnesses contradicted themselves. But here's why it's still interesting. The physics discussion isn't crazy. Electromagnetic fields can bend light. They can affect space-time at extreme scales. And during World War II, the military was absolutely experimenting with things they didn't fully understand. So yeah, maybe the story is wacko, but the idea that someone tried to mess with invisibility, space-time, or reality itself, that part isn't hard to believe at all. Story 18. The Kaz II incident is one of those real-life mysteries that feels staged, except it wasn't. In 2007, the yacht Kaz II was found drifting off the coast of Australia near the Great Barrier Reef. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. The sails were partially raised. The engine was running. The boat was in working order, but no one was on board. Inside, it got worse. A laptop was open and powered on. The table was set for a meal. Personal belongings, phones, wallets, shoes were still there. A GPS showed the yacht had been operating normally. One sail was damaged, suggesting trouble, but not catastrophe. 3 experienced sailors had vanished without sending a distress call. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no indication the boat was sinking. Weather conditions were normal. The life raft was missing, which only raises more questions. Why abandon a perfectly functional boat in calm seas? Theories range from a freak accident during sail repair to some chain of panic that made sense only to the men involved. But nothing fully explains why all 3 would leave the boat at once and never be found. A working ship doesn't just become empty. And that S, what makes Kaz II so disturbing? It feels like the crew simply stepped out of reality. Story 19. The Oklahoma City bombing has an overlooked detail that's arguably creepier than any conspiracy theory. Officially, the bombing ended 168 people. Case closed. Except it wasn't. During a recovery, investigators found an additional severed leg in the rubble. At first, they assumed it belonged to one of the known victims. DNA testing later showed it did belong to a victim who had already been buried. But here's the problem. That victim already had a different leg buried with them. In other words, one person had been buried with the wrong leg. The incorrect leg had already been embalmed, which destroyed usable DNA at the time. That meant no immediate way to identify who the extra leg belonged to. Investigators checked every other victim. All other limbs were accounted for. No missing persons, no unclaimed bodies, nothing. So officially, the death toll stayed at 168. It wasn't until 2015, thanks to improved DNA techniques, that they were able to test the leg properly. The result didn't match anyone. To this day, it's classified as belonging to John Doe. Nobody, no name, no explanation. That S.Y. some people quietly refer to it as the 169th victim, and why fringe theories popped up about a second bomber caught in the blast. There's no proof of that, just a leg from someone who, on paper, never existed. Story 20. There are many theories why Ötzi, the ice mummy man from the ice that died in 3200 BC in the glaciers of what is now Tyrol in Austria, was murdered. The cause of death was a shot to the back with an arrow, but there are many things that don't make sense. Like some people think it was his own hunting party that ended him, because his stomach showed a big meal that someone would not be able to make when he'd be on the run. Still, the analysis shows that he tried to evade some pursuers. He got up and down in the mountains. He was in a melee fight not long before his death. There are many more things, like the murderer left his very valuable copper axe behind, which doesn't make sense, as it was extremely expensive in this time. It was a high-tech tool and weapon, but even for that, there are maybe simple answers, like that the murderers could have been identified by the tribe if they had taken his personal items. Whoever ended him had a serious reason to track him down in that difficult terrain and to keep up with his escape, but it wasn't about money in the way of a robbery to get the valuable items from him. Probably it was a conflict with his own men in the hunting party that set out to hunt some animals. Story 21. Stonehenge is one of those things everyone thinks they understand, until you actually look into it. For centuries, people were sure they knew what it was. Druids built it. No, Romans. No, ancient Britons used primitive tools. Every few generations, a confident explanation shows up, and then quietly collapses when new evidence comes in. What we know now is actually stranger. Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. It was constructed, modified, abandoned, rebuilt, and reused for over 1,000 years. Different generations kept coming back to it, changing its layout, hauling in new stones, and repurposing the site, without leaving a single written explanation why. Some of the stones came from over 150 miles away in Wales. That's multi-ton rocks dragged across land and water by people with no wheels, no metal tools, and no draft animals. And they did it repeatedly. It's been a burial ground, a ceremonial site, a solar and lunar alignment marker, possibly a place of healing, possibly all of the above at different times. Then somehow it just faded. Outside the local area, it was basically forgotten for centuries, becoming a ruin people walked past without really knowing what it was. That's the part that gets me. Something that took generations to build, mattered deeply for over a millennium, and we still don't know who started it or why. Story 22. The Watcher House is one of those stories that proves you don't need anything supernatural to be terrified. In 2014, a family bought a house in Westfield, New Jersey. Before they even moved in, a letter arrived in the mailbox. It was signed simply, The Watcher. The letter said the house had been watched for decades, that previous generations had waited for new owners, and now it was their turn. At first it sounded like a prank, until more letters came. The writer mentioned specific details about the family, their children, where they played, changes inside the house, things you'd only know if you were very close, possibly watching from a neighboring window, possibly standing outside at night. The tone shifted from eerie to threatening. The Watcher asked about the children by number, asked where they slept, asked if the parents were paying attention. Police investigated. Neighbors were questioned. DNA was tested. No solid suspect. No confession. No explanation. The family never moved in. They eventually sold the house at a loss. To this day, no one knows who the Watcher was, or if they ever stopped watching. The worst part? The letters may have ended, but the house is still there. Story 23. There is a conspiracy theory that John Wilkes Booth escaped the night he supposedly was shot, and that the person instead was a patsy made to look like him, and it is that patsy who is buried in the Booth family plot. The living descendants of the Booth family want to have the body exhumed and have the DNA from the body in the family plot compared to the DNA on both the pieces of vertebrae taken out when the autopsy happened, which the pieces are in a medical museum in DC, and get DNA from the body of JWB's brother Edwin. The courts, however, have denied the request, so the question is it just a conspiracy theory that someone else is in the family grave, or is it really Booth himself? Story 24. So I am a little fuzzy on the story, but my mom's cousin was assassinated in Washington in the early 80s. Her murder fit Gary Ridgway perfectly. However, it's one of the few that he denied he had done, which is odd because he took credit for a ton of murders he didn't do. He actually had a strong alibi the night she was murdered. It's still unsolved, but the theory in the family is that there was a copycat Green River killer. One of my uncles has gone down the rabbit hole for nearly 40 years and is convinced that there was another killer in the area, and Gary Ridgway was actually the copycat. Story 25. Missy Bevers for me. She was a fitness instructor who had an early morning class at a local community center. One night, she showed up early to set up and was found murdered by her students. When the police looked at the security footage from the center, there was video of someone in head-to-toe SWAT gear wandering around the center for several hours before murdering her, but they've never been able to confirm who this person is, despite a very distinctive walk. The person just wanders in and out of rooms, opens doors, etc. Super weird case. Story 26. In early 2007, I attended a film festival in New York. During my stay there, I purchased a boxed set of Magic: The Gathering cards. I believe it was from the Lorwyn expansion. After purchasing this very expensive boxed set, I proceeded to see the next film on the festival schedule, a horrifyingly amateurish and nightmarishly exploitive film entitled The Illuminati, or something like that. After a speech by the film's director and producer, a very pretentious older woman that clearly was suffering from early onset dementia, I proceeded to leave the theater with my friends to eat at a nearby pizza restaurant. Right before ordering, I realized, in horror, that my bag containing my Lorwyn set had gone completely missing and was no longer on my person. I was forced to skip dinner, leave my friends, and navigate the unfamiliar subway system on my own, rushing back to the theater to reclaim my lost Magic cards. Nary were they under the seat I was sitting on, nor anywhere nearby. I was forced to search the entire theater, looking under seats and interrogating any theater staff I came across to look for my missing cards and bag. Till this day, this disappearance has been unsolved. Story 27. How life actually formed on Earth is one of those things we talk about like it is settled, when it absolutely isn't. We have theories, lots of them, but when you strip it down, we don't know how non-living chemistry crossed the line into something we confidently call alive. There's no agreed upon moment, no clear trigger, no fossil that says this is where life began. At some point, Earth was just chemistry, water, minerals, energy, random reactions. Then somehow, molecules started organizing, replicating, protecting information, consuming energy to keep going. But where does chemistry end and life begin? Is it replication, metabolism, a membrane, intent? That boundary is still completely blurry. Some theories say life started in warm little ponds. Others say deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Some argue it needed lightning, UV radiation, or clay surfaces. Others think life might not have started here at all, but arrived already halfway formed. Even worse, once you zoom in, the problem gets uglier. Modern cells are insanely complex. DNA, RNA, proteins, membranes, all dependent on each other. How did any of that bootstrap itself into existence without already being alive? We don't know when life became life. We don't know how many failed attempts came before it worked. We don't even fully agree on what life actually is. Everything alive today is just the descendant of whatever miracle or accident finally crossed that line and we have no idea how it happened. Story 28. One of the strangest unsolved mysteries is the case of the Voynich manuscript. This enigmatic book, believed to date back to the early 15th century, is written in an unknown script that has baffled linguists, cryptographers, and historians for centuries. The manuscript is filled with illustrations of bizarre plants that don't match any known species, mysterious astronomical and astrological charts, and strange depictions of nude women engaging in inexplicable activities. Despite numerous attempts to decode its contents, the language or code used in the manuscript remains undeciphered, and its purpose and origin are still unknown. Some theories suggest it might be an elaborate medieval medical text, an alchemical manual, a coded message, or even an intricate hoax. The Voynich manuscript remains one of the most perplexing and enduring mysteries, capturing the imagination of those who seek to unlock its secrets. Story 29. In March 2014, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 people vanished mid-flight. No distress call, no emergency transmission, just silence. Radar showed the plane deliberately changed course, flying back over Malaysia, then turning south into the Indian Ocean. Someone in the cockpit manually disabled communication systems, one by one. The plane then flew for hours on autopilot until it likely ran out of fuel and crashed somewhere in one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. Search teams scoured millions of square miles. Years later, small pieces of debris washed up on distant shores, confirming the plane went down, but not where, not how, and not why. No wreckage field, no black boxes, no clear motive. Was the pilot ending his life? Hijacking? Mechanical failure followed by human error? Every theory fits part of the puzzle and fails the rest. And the fact that this happened in an age of satellites, radar, and non-stop tracking makes it worse. A wide-body jet didn't just crash, it disappeared, and we still don't really know how that's possible. Story 30, the Dyatlov Pass incident. In 1959, 9 experienced hikers led by Igor Dyatlov set out on an expedition in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. They were expected to return by February 12th, but when no communication was received from them, a search party was dispatched. Their tent was found on February 26th, torn open from the inside. The hikers had fled in various stages of undress despite freezing temperatures. Their bodies were discovered over the next few weeks in varying conditions, some with severe injuries. While some hikers died of hypothermia, others had fatal injuries. One had a fractured skull, 2 had severe chest injuries, and 1 woman was missing her tongue and eyes. The nature of these injuries suggested a force not typically encountered by humans, described as comparable to a car crash. Story 31. The Maura Murray disappearance causes me so much stress and sleepless nights that I try not to think about it. It drives me insane that there are no credible leads after all these years. If I even think about her case, I'll spend hours scouring the internet for anything new, but it's all just the same information for years. I remember the case. She probably got into a state of shock after the car crash. In such a state, people are out of mind and can do things that make no sense at all. Another thing, which is different in the sources, like between the German and English sources, was her mental health state and her alcoholism. The mental breakdowns before that made it clear she had problems. Her alcoholism is difficult to get, as some sources mention she wasn't drinking that much, while others say she was an alcoholic. If she was an alcoholic, there comes another state, the delirium tremens, into play. That's the worst thing that can happen. In withdrawal, it is a full-blown psychosis with hallucinations and detachment from reality. It can also end you, like by cardiac arrest. In the end, she died somewhere in the woods there, I guess. I don't think she'd have been able to leave everything behind and start a new life. Only a very few people, like fugitives that disappeared when the law enforcement tried to get them, were even able to do this. It could also be the combination of all together, like the mental health problems and the idea to start a new life, together with the alcoholism and the car crash. Story 32. Bermagui. The missing men of Bermagui. I will forever bang on about this. It was the 1880s. 5 grown men disappeared completely. No trace of them or their bodies. Weird stuff left behind on the beach. The boat scuttled from the inside, never seen again. The whole thing is weird AF and will never be solved, I imagine, not after all this time. I did a YouTube video about this after the last time I mentioned it on Reddit, if anyone wants to see it. Story 33, crop circles are in T mysterious because some are fake. They re-mysterious because of how hard the entire subject was publicly buried. By the late 1970s and 1980s, crop circles started becoming extremely complex. Huge geometric patterns appearing overnight, often without broken stalks, tool marks, or footprints. Some showed bent crops that looked heated and woven, not crushed. Soil anomalies were reported. Electromagnetic effects were measured. Researchers took it seriously. Then something odd happened. As the research community grew, it was suddenly discredited. Hard. The media shifted overnight to ridicule. Funding vanished. Scientists who studied the phenomenon were labeled crackpots. And the narrative locked in fast. It's just pranksters with boards. The famous hoaxers admitted to making some circles, but not all. And even they said certain formations weren't theirs. Despite this, their confession was used to collapse the entire field. Here's the part people find suspicious. Declassified documents and researcher testimony later suggested intelligence agencies were monitoring crop circle research, especially cases involving electromagnetic readings, radiation effects, and precision geometry. Why? Because unexplained aerial phenomena, ground effects, and mass misidentification overlap with defense and surveillance concerns. Not aliens, but unknown variables. It's likely many circles were fake. It's also likely some weren't. The easiest way to neutralize an uncomfortable unknown isn't to explain it. It's to make sure no serious person ever touches it again. And that's exactly what happened. Story 34, the fate of the settlers of Roanoke. They had a plan to assimilate with a local tribe if the colony failed. They would let future people know this by a message written on a fence. When people finally returned the name of the island the tribe lived on was mysteriously written on a fence. Also, the Native American tribe somehow had a bunch of white people in it. Truly the greatest mystery ever.